I'm a young black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Race and white privilege, they're difficult subjects to talk about. They're difficult subjects to pitch as journalists because the words race and privilege make us uncomfortable. Well, today, as the United States enters another week of protests following the killing of George Floyd, that's the conversation we're going to have. And we're asking, how can artists help change happen? I'm joined by three Americans: poet and slam artist Aja Monet from Miami, author and journalist Dimitry Elias Léger from New York, and filmmaker Damian Kudelka, who's in Poland. Now, Aja, starting with you, since George Floyd's killing, outrage has spread across America and the world, including here in France. We have seen this many times before, though, but something feels different now. Why?
Well, thank you for having me. First, I think I just want to make clear that I'm a poet and an organizer. It's really important to share that because the work that I do is, yes, involved with language and words, but also about how we shift culture and how we move people through moments like this. We are looking at a moment that comes post-COVID-19 reality. And so therefore, you're looking at people who have been at home for 3 months, sitting around watching their governments do literally nothing to protect the poorest and most vulnerable in their communities, primarily Black and brown people. At the same time, we're not just battling the pandemic of COVID, we're battling the pandemic that has always existed of white terrorism and racism that has been permeated not through just America. This is also a French issue. This is also a Belgian issue. This is also a UK issue.
Dimitry, you've been out on the streets in protest in Manhattan. What was it like?
It's been great. It's exciting. It's quite scary. New York City is one of the most policed cities on earth. And on the other hand, the protests are amazing to see. The crowds are young, they're energized, they're multiracial. It's a good sign that this time the voices will be heard and this protest may have lasting results.
Now, Aja, your powerful poem, The First Time, arose from the way you saw a police officer talking down to your brother. Tell us about it.
I wrote The First Time because I was grappling with the truth that violence manifests in many ways. I think there's these small acts of violence that take place in our communities that deal with intimidation or belittling. The stories that get shared and broadcasted, it always comes at the expense of Black humanity. We're always seen as dehumanized. We're always seen as lynch porn is what the media shares. This poem was about a moment where someone I looked up to as a hero, my brother, was made to feel less than and made to feel as if he was not a hero.
And one of the lines talks of how you saw how brown and Black boys grow into themselves, angry at the world. Now, Dimitry, you've got a son and a daughter. What are you telling them about this time?
This time is not new to them because this is conversations we've been having all their lives. What this opportunity does present, and this is what's exciting about this thing, is it's important for them to understand that they're not alone. They have allies. And this particular situation, with this particular eruption, their allies look like very different people. They come from all over the world. Millions and millions of people around the world stand with them. We know the bad whites. But the good whites are emerging, are making themselves heard this time around.
Now, Damian, you've been protesting about this issue through film. In 2014, you left your job in the financial sector in Manhattan and made the documentary By Any Means Necessary after seeing the video of Eric Garner saying, "I can't breathe," moments before he died after being arrested. 6 years later, if you were to make a film about George Floyd, would it be different?
Police brutality occurs all the time. This isn't just like one incident. A few months ago in March, in Washington State in the U.S., Emmanuel Lewis was killed by the Washington State Police by a chokehold. It was not caught on tape. There's a lot of unnamed victims that of once again, variety type of police actions, and particularly in the Black and brown communities that we don't hear about because, I mean, it's just too much information to absorb every day of dozens and dozens of names. So the most egregious and videotaped incidents rise up to the top. To your question about how I would film it differently, I think I would embed more with protesters, embed more with the community, and try to tell the story of the impacted communities, as opposed to focusing more on a systemic critique of policing. I would shift a little bit more on the human element and the human toll.
Now, film is a powerful art form in the fight for change. Spike Lee, who's always put racial discrimination at the heart of his work, has released a short film which compares George Floyd's treatment by police with Eric Garner's and with Radio Raheem's, who was the character in his 1989 film Do the Right Thing. All were choked by police officers. Take a look.
I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time. Please just leave me alone. Please, don't touch me. Don't touch me, please.
Hold on.
Listen, don't touch me, please.
The girl came over.
Do not touch me.
Gave us a bag and gave us shit.
Now, Aja, Spike Lee's film opens with the words, "Will history stop repeating itself?" His original film talking about this was 30 years ago. Eric Garner died in New York in 2014 after being arrested. The officer involved has never been charged. 6 years later, George Floyd died in Minneapolis. A white police officer has been charged. Do you think things are changing?
I think things are getting window dressing, but I don't think things have structurally actually changed. As we look to defund the police, our demands is that we have to uproot and disrupt the entire system. We have to talk about the history of this country and name the harm that was done in order for it to be truly resolved. If we don't do that work, if we don't actually uproot the very foundation of this country, then we are going to continue to see this problem. We're asking for defunding the police because that also comes with putting resources elsewhere. Somewhere in Europe, there are people who fought for people to have the right to healthcare and quality education. Now, the system is not perfect. Europe has its own issues. However, we're still fighting with our government to prove that people deserve basic human decency, like not going to the hospital and leaving with an entire bill that they cannot afford, and making sure that their families have a fighting chance to live and love and to be with people that they've been working themselves to the bone to provide for and take care of, because there's this random narrative that's a lie that somehow Black people don't work and we don't participate in this country. We've been arguing for these things for a very, very long time, since the very inception of this country, founded on chattel slavery. That means that white folks have to confront within themselves what in them normalized enslaving human beings and building an entire system off of it. This is a white racist, supremacist ideology that needs to face the delusions about itself and to correct those delusions so that we can truly heal and transform this injustice system that we live in.
Now, there are many ways to fight, to protest. Aja, for you, it's poetry. One of the ways is poetry. Your contribution to the Say Her Name campaign, which is a movement focusing on police violence against women, was an incredible poem that includes the names of girls and women who've been injured or killed by the police.
Rakia Boyd, Tanisha Anderson, Yvette Smith, Ayanna Jones, Kayla Moore, Shelley Frey, Miriam Carey, Kendra James, Alberta Spruill, Tarika Wilson, Sharice Francis, Chantel Davis, Melissa Williams, Darnisha Harris, Michelle Casso, Pearlie Golden, Catherine Johnston, Eleanor Bumpers, Natasha McKenna, Shaniqua Proctor, Sandra Bland.
Well, you've done so much, Aja, to get the message out there. Have you been writing poems in the recent weeks?
I think that, yes, I've been writing, but I see poetry as more of a way of moving in the world. And so I also have been organizing using poems to help politicize our communities. A poem offers a way in, a perspective, a lighthouse, it brings people together toward a common humanity, a common feeling, and forces us to really rethink how we love one another, how we live with one another, and how we structure our systems.
And a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Jericho Brown after his Pulitzer Prize win for his book, The Tradition. In his poem of the same name, he lists the Black men who've lost their lives, or some of the Black men who've lost their lives at the hands of police: John Crawford, Eric Garner, and Mike Brown. And in the interview, he talked about an experience of prejudice that inspired that poem.
It's a poem that I wrote after moving into my new home. I was working on a flower bed in front of my house. And I was at that time the only Black person who lived in this neighborhood. One of my neighbors, and they're also kind. I love my neighbors so much. It's a great, great community. One of my neighbors walked right by me while I was working on the flower bed. They walked right by me to the door and rang the doorbell right in front of me. And I looked up and I said, "Hello, can I help you?" And they said, "Oh, I'm looking for the man or the woman of the house." And they didn't realize that I could possibly be the man or the woman of the house. They only thought of me as someone who could work on the yard, but not someone who could be invested in the yard's beauty for myself.
Now, Aja, there's been a lot of talk about how the work for change must be done by white people as we've built the system. But many white people can't actually see the stuff that's subconscious. What is the role of artists in that change?
It's not artists' job to educate the world on how messed up it is, but artists typically tend to be some of the most sensitive, critical thinking people in our communities. And oftentimes that means that they produce art that really does put a mirror to society and expose things. It's telling about a government or a system or a society that doesn't value its artists. An American education system is suffering from that greatly because our arts and our humanities programs have been defunded. Speaking of white people, white folks, I can't tell you what needs to be done. All white people still have to interrogate their blind spots and their assumption that because they aren't overt racist or because they aren't, because they're uplifting Black voices, that somehow they're more compassionate or understanding of the issue, or they're more centered on the issue. We need white folks to really do some critical interior work about what is it that makes it okay for them to live day to day knowing that people are redlined and ostracized and put in ghettos and enslaved and not given proper resources, and that they don't wake up every day angry and frustrated and ready to change something. There are human beings being murdered on live television. How does that not transform you? And this needs to be addressed by white people, not Black people.
Damian, what's your reaction to that?
I just preaching to the choir through education, through friendships, through my life experience. I am very, very much aware of the struggles of the Black community in the U.S., and the Black experiences is vastly different than the white experiences in the U.S. I was so upset and angry about what happened with Eric Garner that I quit my job, used all my savings to make a film to try to empower the impacted communities. So I'm just using that as one example of my own commitment.
I just wanted to stress that I don't think it's about us suffering. It's not about Black people suffering. What I need is white folks to understand that they are the ones suffering. They are the ones that are holding this hatred. They are the ones that are sitting around okay with this. And as much as I appreciate white allies and people who want to help tell the stories of Black people, I'm more concerned with how do white folks expose this own internal suffering? How do they tell their stories about what it is that is so sickening in themselves that forces them to be okay with the world that they have created? It can be done. Nothing is impossible. When you see people taking to the streets, everything is possible when we are working together. And it's white people that need to be telling that truth.
Dimitry, then, what do we need to do that we can give more space to Black people, that we can give more Black artists a voice?
Publishers have to publish more writers from all over the world, more Black writers. Movie studios have to finance more Black directors and screenwriters. I mean, TV studios have to produce more Black showrunner-driven shows.
From what Aja says, is it actually needs to be the publishers who are Black. The TV studios need to be Black. It's not enough to just give more space.
It's going to be a combination. It's always going to be a combination because in a capitalist system, capital is controlled by the people with capital.
Yeah.
So there's going to be partnerships. And people with capital have to partner up with the artists, with the voices and something to say. One of the best stories in Western civilization that always makes me laugh is the Superman story. Now, Superman is an alien, grows up in Kansas, and after that moves to New York City, where his main job is to stop bank robbers. How do you live on a planet when you know 1 billion people, plus the ones who live in Western societies, are permanent underclass, living and suffering through things that were eradicated and cured and fixed in white communities ages ago? No superhero would ever let that slide.
Okay, well, good luck, all of you. Thank you so much for joining us, Aja, Dimitry, and Damian. Now, several artists have created murals and paintings to mark this moment of time. We're going to leave you with some of those powerful and poignant works.
À La Réunion, la plupart de nos plages ont été transformées en cimetières.
11 deaths in 10 years. Surfers, swimmers, all killed by one of man's few predators, the shark. In recent years, shark attacks have increased on this French island in the Indian Ocean, an island that is divided between those who are pro and anti-shark. The attacks are hurting the economy, tourism, and Réunion's image. Our reporters have been to the island paradise to find out what's being done to shake off its Shark Island image.
On va aller réappâter du matériel de pêche au requin dans le cadre d'une campagne de pêche préventive qui est ordonnée et organisée par les autorités et les pouvoirs publics.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.